So for me, I feel like the paradigm shift is happening, whether we support it or not. And for me, our role is, or my role, I see my role as supporting the folks who are awakening and transitioning, and like catching them and helping them acclimate.
Right. And I appreciate that. And sorry, and it's true. But in the conversation we had a moment ago, I asked you also what's been your role in the paradigm shift, and you said pretty much what you just said, that you think it's happening, and not so much that you're making it happen. And I was just pointing out that you are also part of it, just as we all do our little bits. Those of us who are shaking things up, and that's part of the undercurrent that's running through, that is making it happen, and maybe I hope now accelerating the shifts that need to happen.
Yeah, I think what you said, I know we had just turned off the recording and you said it's both. It's both the like supporting people as they arrive. It's happening on its own. And what I loved about, you said, and we're like the undercurrent or the undergirding of the shift.
Right.
And I that really resonated with me. I was like, yes, because if we don't show up in that way, it's not like we can control the outcome exactly, but we can help shape it in I want to say like in a positive direction.
Absolutely. And accelerate it was another word that I used.
Yes. Yeah. Accelerate it.
Absolutely. And some of that has meant for many of us coming out more into the open. But many people I know, friends and colleagues, have been doing this work for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, really. And now we're seeing it being talked about more openly, and maybe perhaps in part in response to the tremendously urgent need that has shown itself on so many fronts in the last 4 years, and especially in this past year.
Yeah, and that feels really important. Like it feels really, I don't think we've talked about this on recording, but just for me, the intergenerational piece of our relationship feels really important, because I'm new, right? Like I've only been a Kohenet for 11 years, and like in that community for 14 years. And before that, I had dreams of being a priestess, but I wasn't doing the work. And you've been doing it for a long time, and you are tapped in to communities of folks who've been doing this priestessing for, effectively a whole generation before I showed up. Yeah. And so your perspective on that, I think, is, it feels patronizing for me to say this, so I'm not saying your perspective is valuable.
Patronizing.
But I mean, it's valuable to me personally. Like, yeah. I really value getting to hear from someone who made it possible for me to be a Kohenet.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yes, and it's the same for us. We are happy to constantly, I hope, many of us recognize the shoulders of the women on who, the women whose shoulders we stand. And I can't go back far enough. I'm trying to find out, more about my great-grandmothers and great-great, and some of the information is just not available. So that's been one of my great frustrations of late. But it occurred to me the other day that the one great-great-great-grandfather I found out was a rabbi a few years ago. It occurred to me the other day that it's very likely his wife was a priestess, but she was a domestic priestess, perhaps. Maybe she was a pillar of her community. I will never know, because I think we found out as much as we can about her, but that doesn't mean I will stop digging. But many, many roles that contemporary priestess would play in terms of blessing work and just the kind of support that we provide a community could well have been happening. I mean, if we think that women were doing the role of Kohenet, independent of whether they were married to or daughter of a priest 2,000 years ago, why would we not also apply that logic to people who lived 200 years ago?
Of course, yeah. I'm curious, I know you're going to address this in your paradigm shift project. You'll be addressing it live with your teachers. But now, now that we're talking about, when you talked about it's both, like I really want to hear about that from you, as someone you've lived and felt as a priestess in the old paradigm for longer than I have. And so I wonder if there's a different quality to this experience for you.
Great joy in seeing that now there is an institute, which can ordain or initiate. in a formal way that is more likely to be recognized by the outside world. So great delight in that. And relief at not having to constantly defend and prove the position and the role and the functions, because now there are other women who get it, who are doing it. And so, there are not just a few of us lone wolves out there doing that, marking the path, or however you want to call it. We were relying sometimes on Monique Wittig's phrase of, try to remember and failing that, invent. We were doing some of that. But I also want to say, because I thought this was where you were going to go in terms of paradigm shift, that a lot of my work in that area has been with several amazing women, actually a number of amazing women, but I will just name 3 in the academic realm, because I worked with them so close and so long, and still in many ways do. And that's Dr. Chris Brandenburger, Dr. Diane Jeanette, and Dr. Judy Grenn. Diane and Judy and I co-directed the Women's Spirituality Master's Program for many years, first at New College, then at Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, then at Sophia University, which it became. And our paradigm shifting work was in how we taught, in our pedagogy, in working with, respecting the knowledge that was in the circle, which is certainly not a new idea. Native Americans and many others, ancients, have done it for many years. But in the Western academic paradigm, co-teaching itself, team teaching, was kind of new. And certainly the way we did it, the way we modeled even our own disagreements and mistakes for students, to show them that it was okay to make mistakes and we wanted to hear their voice anyway. I think those are just a couple of the things that made that paradigm shifting kind of work. Louisa Tisch certainly has done it, Leilani Byerly, Vicki Noble. There are many people I'm afraid to start naming because I'm afraid of who I won't have time to name. But those are just a few of the examples of people we also taught with, who I think in their own ways have definitely done paradigm shifting. With Vicki Noble it was, and also Louisa Tisch, it's been ways of, and also Chandra Alexander, ways of either creating new spiritual traditions or interweaving other traditions and being open to people of other traditions coming into our own, and weaving, doing this braiding of spiritual traditions that allowed for a combined practice, which is something you can tell I feel very strongly about, because it used to be, I was raised with either or. And at the point when I started knowing about the goddess and feminist spirituality, my father one day said, "So you're not really Jewish anymore." And I took great offense at that, was quite shocked at the statement, and then disabused him of that notion and explained why that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I hear that. I also was raised with either or. And so for me, one of the things I love about Renewal Judaism is the invitation to acknowledge sources and to appreciate rather than appropriate material from other cultures. We don't do it perfectly. It's definitely a process. We weren't doing a very good job of appreciating and not appropriating sources within our own traditions until very recently. We weren't crediting, writers of contemporary prayers when we put them in our prayer books, and that's something that I've really seen shift, like an acknowledgement of naming how important it is to name whose shoulders on which we stand, and name our collaborators and our colleagues. And there's one other shift that I want to mention, like the evidence is also in the way that we look at gender, and especially in the Kohenet Institute and community, that it's not only women's space anymore. And we have non-binary folks who are becoming Kohenot, and we're looking at language, and we're thinking about, I don't know if Kohenet uses the language of marginalized genders, but that's certainly reflective in who is a member of who is becoming a Kohenet, who is studying, who feels welcome. And I think this is becoming true in the Jewish world and in other spaces as well. Like the fact that there are there's an all gender Hebrew that has been written by a college student in the US, and folks are sharing those resources. We're not only bringing the feminine more fully into the main space, but we're acknowledging that it's not only the feminine.
Thank you for mentioning sharing of resources. I think that's really important. And of course, this whole movement you're just naming is also very important. And so I'm thinking about Shiloh a wonderful artist with amazing energy who started something called Cosmic Cowgirls and does so many projects we can never keep track of all the things she's doing at one time. But she has not only been very invitational, but also open and sharing her resources. And I think that's critical. In other words, allowing us to use her art without charging us, as long as we gave her credit. And I think that sharing is so critical now. And that academic mindset of, oh, I've got to keep this close, really close to the vest. It's mine, it's proprietary. I don't really want anyone to read it until maybe it's published. I don't want to share it. Those things really, I think, held us back and held our thinking back in certain ways, and certainly the expansion of our thinking by sharing it. One other point I want to say too, many of us have been working on writing new liturgy or adapting old and ancient liturgy, Dvorah Kalila especially, for example. And so Vicky Noble, one of the things she did was to reinterpret, again, as we're doing, a tradition of Tibetan Buddhism from a feminist lens, through a feminist lens. So she was able to have the right teachers, and which is also so important, to work with teachers who will keep a fire going under you and recognize what you're doing and witness it, and not immediately say, oh, well, that doesn't really count because it's mainstream or male stream. So.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like we should have somewhere where we can just like list, right now we're just doing videos on Facebook, so we don't have a landing page, but it would be great to have like links to folks who influenced us, and with whom we are collaborating, even like an archive of the guests that we've had on Priestessing the Priestesses.
Yes,
and I should acknowledge, like we just jumped in because we're like, oh, maybe we want to use this conversation we're having about paradigm. So this is this has become Priestessing the Priestesses episode 16 with Kohenet, Dvorah, Grenn, and Kohenet and Matan.
Yes, we did just jump in today. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.
Another thing I was going to say is that sometimes people comment on the videos we post and talk about having a landing page. It's not a bad idea, because also I would love to have people's comments on what paradigm shift means to them. And I know many of our students went out and continued to shift paradigms in their own families, in their own communities. And of course, it all starts there. And then
so contextually, so Dvorah is in a class and is doing a project where you're interviewing women about what is paradigm shift and what is our role in it. And for this class project, and then after she interviewed me, we were like, maybe we want to use this. And then I said, but wait, now I want to hear yours. So that's why this conversation happened this way. And so also for the purpose of your class, folks, if you're watching, we would especially love to hear your feedback on what paradigm shift means to you, and if you are someone who, if we are all supporting it, I think. So feel free to answer that question, and maybe let Dvorah know if you're comfortable with her using it in her project. And maybe your sharing about paradigm shift and how you show up might be included. I don't know. We're not making any guarantees, but
but if they make a comment in a public forum, then they are giving permission in that way. And of course, anybody I'm videoing, I've already gotten permission from, so no worries there.
Those folks you have, but yes, the commenters, just know that it might get used in that way.
Yeah, but I do love the idea of having, and maybe it could be my Lilith Institute Facebook page. Maybe it could be a landing page for this.
Yeah, we'll figure it out, and stay tuned.
We create something new again. We don't have a Priestessing the Priestesses page, and it would be nice to have an archive of the episodes and who we've had on as guests. We've had just a few, but we have more coming, and these are always very interesting and very different conversations. So it would be good to have a place for all of that to live. Maybe a YouTube channel.
Stay tuned for the home of Priestessing the Priestesses, yet to be determined.
What's the last thing you said? You frayed it out.
Oh, I just said yet to be determined. Stay tuned.
Yes. Stay tuned.
TBD.
So, right. So
well, thank you for inviting me into this conversation about paradigm, and for being willing. Then I turned the tables, and now I'm glad that's you.
We do that with each other very well, I think. All right. So I'm going to say goodbye, and goodbye to the audience, but not goodbye to Annie, just a farewell.
Okay.